Good evening. Good evening. I like the interactivity. Let's try it again. Good evening. Yay! Now, if I could get that kind of interactivity during the pledge drive at All Classical FM, that would be fantastic. My name is Christa Wessel. I'm the morning host at said classical radio station. We are on our pledge drive right now, asking for your calls. Do you know the number yet? 1-888-899-5722. Forgive me. I feel compelled to do that. I do these pre-concert chats occasionally with members of the Oregon Symphony. I feel like it's such a privileged experience to be able to get to know the individual music makers who are giving this wonderful experience for us tonight. This is our principal tympanist of the Oregon Symphony. His name is John Greeney. Do tympanists ever get rounds of applause?
Not very often.
We'll get used to it. John, you have been with the Oregon Symphony how long?
For a year and a half now. Yeah. This will close my second season. So.
And of course, you didn't just appear. You have an interesting life history that led you here. My first question to you is, how does somebody decide to play the timpani? First of all, does everybody know what the timpani are? They're the big kettle drums in the very back of the symphony, the biggest percussion instrument on stage, the big copper kettles. How does one decide that they want to play the timpani?
Well, there's very few people, I think, that just play timpani. Most people play all percussion instruments. And when you're in school studying, in college, when you're studying all the different instruments, sometimes you start to gravitate towards one or the other. But it was, I studied all percussion instruments, and I still play all the percussion instruments. But I always, deep down, really wanted to be, a tympanist with an orchestra. But when I was taking auditions for trying to get a job, I was taking auditions for all percussion. Sometimes it would be just a percussion opening, sometimes it would be a percussion with an assistant timpani opening, and then sometimes it would just be timpani. And so timpani was kind of the gold medal for me, and ended up working out pretty well for this one. So,
when you were a kid, I remember being in, 4th or 5th grade and choosing my instrument, and I chose the French horn. Did you go into your school music director's office and say, I want to play the timpani? How did that work?
No, actually, when I was in middle school, I wanted to be a rock star, and I wanted to play guitar, and so. I started, my mother played guitar, and I asked her, I was like, hey, can you teach me how to play? And so she taught me a few chords, and I just played all the time, my fingers bleeding, everything. And after about 3 or 4 months, I started taking lessons, and my guitar teacher was a jazz guy. And I wasn't too into jazz, but, he kind of wet the palate a little bit. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll see if I like to play jazz. So when I got into high school, I wanted to play in the jazz band, and our school had this strange clause that you couldn't be in jazz band unless you were in the music department. So I wasn't singing in choir, and you can't play guitar in band. So I was just like, well, I guess I'll just, drums are cool. So I'll play percussion. That looks kind of cool. And I had played some drum set in some of the rock bands that I had played in, and then I kind of fell in love with the marimba, actually, and it was just something fresh and new that I'd never heard. And so I started playing that and playing other percussion instruments, and with no desire to play in an orchestra, actually. But I just decided that, I wanted to go and study music, and I had kind of morphed away from guitar into percussion, and I didn't really know what was out there. And fate have it, I ended up in the hands of just a master teacher, and he kind of inspired me to consider leaning towards timpani, and I did. And I had a friend in college that said, playing percussion is great, but there's nothing like playing timpani with an orchestra. And
why is that? What makes timpani the rock star of the percussion section for you?
It's so cool. You're counting a lot of rests like the percussionist, but when you play, you're playing a lot of times actually more with the brass than you are with the percussion section, and you're this driving force. A lot of times people call the tympanist the second conductor, because it drives the group, and you're functioning rhythmically, but also harmonically because they're pitched instruments. I don't know if you guys know, but they have pedals, and you can change the pitch of the instrument. And so you're at the end of a great symphony, and you're not just smacking a drum. You're also like functioning harmonically with the group, and it's really, really, really rewarding. And my teacher always said, he's like, if you can't just put like 2 low notes, like get like a B flat and an F or something on timpani, and just hit them once each, and just think that's, if you don't think that's amazing, then you just don't like timpani. And so it's such a weird instrument, but it's cool. It's also kind of a weird thing to study, as well as classical percussion, orchestrally, because if you don't get a job with an orchestra, it's not like you can play timpani on the side of the street for cash, So there's no, it's really like,
Have you ever tried, actually?
No, no, I have not. I've played hand drums in the Florida Keys and stuff, but I've never played, never brought out timpani or xylophone or snare drum. Hey, so it's really all or nothing. It's like you have to go all the way and get yourself in a great position to be in an orchestra, or you really don't have a lot to show for yourself. It's kind of a strange gamble. Well,
let me ask you, once you decided to focus on timpani, I can't imagine there's a whole lot of, it's not like a violin section where there's 20-some violin positions in every given orchestra. There's one timpani position in any orchestra. So I would imagine the openings, the competition for jobs as timpanist for an orchestra are pretty scarce and few and far between.
Yeah.
How is that process of auditioning when one opening pops up? Does every single tympanist in the world show up at that audition? How does that work?
Yeah, kinda. There's only one tympanist in every orchestra, and in the United States, there's probably 30, maybe 40, orchestras where you can actually make a living. Some would even question that, and of those, you've got somebody who, if they get that job and they do well in that job, they're going to be there their entire career. And so the openings don't happen very often. They happen a lot more in the percussion section because there's generally 3, sometimes 4 percussionists. And so it's you wait and you practice and you prepare. And then you wait some more, and you practice, and you prepare, and then finally there are websites we go to and different magazines that tell you the job openings that are going to happen. And you hear rumors through the grapevine. Everyone knows who's thinking about retiring or who's been there for. Dick Horowitz in the Met is a tympanist. He's 87 years old. He's still playing. And so some people have been waiting for that audition to open for the last 30 years. It's such a competitive field, and you spend all this time, just insane amount of hours preparing for this one chance, and you get so few chances. You gotta make it count, and in order to do that, I really feel like you have to study with the right people, and you have to just be insanely driven.
Tell me about who you studied with and how audition-focused that course of study was.
Well, in my undergrad, I went to Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, and I studied with Robert Van Cise was my teacher, and he was a famous marimba soloist, actually, and chamber musician. And he had played timpani in Cape Town, Africa for a couple of years, and he'd been all over the world. And so he was teaching me, how to be a musician, and is just a brilliant, brilliant musician. And so I learned how to play chamber music, and I learned how to breathe and feel pulse and shift and move and listen. Really, really, actually, if I could sum up everything I learned from him, he taught me how to listen and how to react to listening. And so yeah, I learned a lot of marimba repertoire and a lot of chamber music. And I was playing timpani in the orchestra, but at that time I still wasn't sure if I wanted to play in an orchestra. And then when I went to grad school, in between then and grad school, I played in an orchestra in Mexico for a couple of years. And that's when I really decided that I was like, I really want to go for this, and I want to try to get a better job, and I think I want to make this my career. And so when you make that kind of decision and you know deep inside that you need help, you look across the board of teachers and see which ones have the most successful students. And I knew who I wanted to study with. He was a member of the Cleveland Orchestra, Tom Freer, and so I moved to Cleveland, and it was
with the express design of winning a better job than the one you had in Mexico.
Yes. At that point, I wasn't interested in this sounds really funny. I wasn't really interested in becoming a better musician. I just wanted to win a job, which is such a strange thing to say, but that school was audition boot camp. I literally don't know how else to say it. It was audition boot camp, and all we did was prepare audition lists and play them, in lessons and tweak them, and then do mock auditions on stage, as many as we possibly could, and recorded them and listened back like we were on a committee, and just intense, and just constantly going to auditions and just, grinding it out is a real grind. And some people grind for a really, really long time. And you can grind it out and then never get anything. And that's like the scariest part. So that was challenging. But there's just no way I would have won this job if I hadn't done that kind of boot camp training. It's a really strange way to get a job. It's different than an interview process, or they don't care what school they care to an extent when you send your application if you get invited, because it's hard to get invited to some auditions.
You can't just show up at the Oregon Symphony stage door and say, I want to audition today, please.
No, you have to send in a resume, and then they'll tell you if you've been invited to the audition or rejected. And I had plenty of rejection letters until I got the job in Mexico. And that was kind of a launch pad for me, because I could then put on my resume that I was a professional. And so I was able to get invited to really any audition that I desired to go to. Even with the exception of a few, I had to have my teacher fight for me to get me in. But yeah, then you go and it's just, they don't know, you're behind a screen. They don't know who you are. They don't know, where you've studied. They don't really know anything about you. All they care about is what you sound like by yourself behind that screen.
And forgive me for asking what sounds like a stupid question, but I can understand when a violinist auditions, there's a lot of technical passages. How fast and how high can you play this? With a timpani, you're just boom, 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 right? So what is
That's
a timpani?
Pretty good. Can you do that again?
Yeah. So what are they judging you on exactly? You're hitting a drum. Sorry.
It's only 15 years of my life's work. But it's my second teacher really phrased it well. He was like, you don't have time to educate anyone. So all you have to work with is sound. You can't go out there and say like, well, this sounds this way, and I'm going to play it this way because of this and this and this. And I feel like this mallet here works better for this, and I'm going to do this with this. You can't explain anything. You are on there for 5 to 10 minutes, and you just play. And a lot of the committee members have no idea what they're listening for. But they are all musicians. And so they're going to be like, okay, this person needs to have good rhythm. The drums have to be in tune. And a lot of them have really good ears for pitch, because there will be a lot of wind players and string players on the committee. And then, does it sound like it's the right tempo of the piece? Hey, I know Beethoven 7, they'll know the piece, they'll know what it is, And then overall, like, is this person, like, how do we like their sound? You know, how do we like that tone that they're creating out of the drum?
But once again, I can understand that in a violinist, right? They have chosen their violin, they have chosen their bow, they have developed their technique specific to that bow and violin. But I am guessing that when you go to audition, you don't cart your timpani around in your suitcase with you, right? Like, you show up and they provide you instruments, so you're being judged on instruments that aren't yours?
I would say 75% of auditions, you play the timpani that are at the audition. There's about 20-25% of the auditions, they will allow you to bring, if it's an orchestra that is has a budget and the time and the space to hold that many sets of timpani, they will allow you to bring your own drums. I mean, I've been to auditions where there are like 30 sets of timpani on stage. And if you are taking an audition where you are allowed to bring drums, you are at a gigantic disadvantage if you don't have your own drums. Because it doesn't matter how great the orchestra's drums are, you're not used to them. And all drums are different. They're different manufacturers, and even the same manufacturers, different years, have different things, different feel. You know, you don't know how the pedals are going to feel, how clear the heads are. And so you're going up against people that have been, you know, with their own drums, they know everything about them. And it's really tough to compete against those kind of people. But when you take an audition, like actually when I took here, it was just one set of drums. That's more of a apples to apples kind of comparison, I feel, because everyone's got the same shot. And so the only way you can change your tone, because you don't have a different instrument, is with the mallets that you choose, and then how you hit the drum. I mean, that's it. That's all you got.
There's more than one way to hit a drum?
Yeah. You know, that actually surprised me, comments coming out of auditions that I took. How much, like on top of the list, how much audition committee members, non-percussionists, would talk about tone over anything else. Oh, we really liked the tone, or we didn't like your tone, or we, you know, this and that. And then they would be like, and the rhythm and the pitch and blah, 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 blah. Generally, if you're getting comments, you're generally, you know, advanced to the semifinals or the finals. And so at that point, usually have decent rhythm and decent pitch. And then they're just like, how does this person sound? And so the way you hit a drum, I mean, I can't demonstrate because I don't have one here, but I mean, if you grip a mallet and you just, you know, death grip it and you just slam it into the head, you know, you can imagine that it's just going to sound kind of ugly. And then if you just take it and you just kind of drop it, it's going to sound maybe kind of natural and pretty. And then depending on where you hit the drum on the head will change that sound. And then there are other things you can do with your hand to manipulate that tone, and then you can change your mallets. And that will vary the degree of heaviness and hardness or softness or different colors of the sound, because you could have two mallets that are soft but one sound just a little bit different. And you'd be surprised, you add up all those factors over the audition, and then, you know, hopefully someone's like, man, I don't know anything about timpani, but that dude just sounds better. and that's what you're kind of going for, you know.
I see that you brought a whole suitcase full of mallets. It's like I kind of thought, you know, a pair of sticks and a drum, but I've learned so much in the last little while. Some look really fuzzy and extra felty.
Yeah, so it's just, there's different grades of piano felt.
Meaning the felt that's actually on
that's
the
actually on the outside. Well, there's really three things that are involved with a mallet. There's the type of stick. There's the core, which you can't see, and then there's the wrapping around the core. And so the sticks, as you can see, like this is just like a spun wooden stick. I think it's maple. This is bamboo. Let's see.
They all resonate differently in your hands?
Yeah, there are different weights and different balances. This is ebony, really dense, heavy stick. And then this is synthetic. It's actually like a plastic that's supposed to like emulate bamboo. Because the problem with bamboo a lot of times is to get two pieces of bamboo exactly the same are really difficult, because they're, you know, it's an organic thing. And so I use these kind of synthetic shaft. And then the core, it will be made of very, very, very hard, pressed, stamped out pieces of felt. I mean like extremely hard pieces of felt. Or it could be a piece of wood, it could be a piece of leather, it could be cork. I mean, the sky's the limit. There are some people that have tried just crazy things. Latex cores, like, I mean, and then on top of that, you then can wrap it, and there's generally 3 types of piano felt that you can use to wrap. There is hard, medium, and soft. And I won't go into too much specifics about those, but once you learn how to wrap your own sticks, and then you wrap it, and then on top of that, like any reed player, you know, just really working on their reeds, you can then voice the mallet with like a pin. You get these voicing tools, and it's basically like 4 pins sticking out, and you just fluff the stick. And you'd be out there, you just be like, oh my God, really? Does that make a difference? And it does. I mean, if you take a stick fresh out of a case, even these are pretty freshly wrapped. And if I had a drum to display, and if I hit the drum with that stick, actually it'd be great to do it one of each. And then I sat for 5-10 minutes and fluffed one of them a lot. I mean, it would just be like apples and oranges. It would be day and night. And so you've got this varying degree of you know, kind of voicing your own mallets on top of all these other, I mean, the combination is just endless.
On any given concert, how many pairs of mallets will you use?
It really depends.
Will you use a couple different pairs in one piece?
I will. Like tonight when we're doing the, what are we playing in the second half?
The Slavonic dances?
Yeah, the Slavonic dances. I'll change, well, actually, yeah, I only changed mallets there a few times. In the piano concerto, I play the first movement with these, which are a wood core and soft German piano felt. And then there's actually one note that I'll switch over to.
One note?
Yeah, to a really big fat set, because it's just this like, yadum, boom, and I want like a really fat tone, so I'll switch to that. And then the second movement, I use these, which are, this is billiards felt, wrapped around a really hard core, and it's really articulate. And so, you know, I'll switch for that. If I'm playing, you know, if I'm playing like Beethoven or something, I generally won't switch that often. But if I'm playing more modern music, usually the more modern it gets, depending on the piece, the more colors I want to introduce. And you can change color with your hand and with how you play, but sometimes it's just easier to just grab another stick.
I'm also noticing that in addition to all these sticks to choose from, mallets, is that
mallets? Yeah.
Sticks, okay. There's also 2 sets of timpani on stage tonight. Mm-hmm. So tell us about the difference in the 2.
It's probably hard for you guys to see, but on the risers are my main set of 4 drums. They're modern drums, and they're modern sizes. They're very big. They have a very rich, deep, big tone, and the range of pitches I can get on them is just great, and the mechanisms, everything is just like beautiful. But when I play early music, like tonight I'll be playing, we're playing Mozart. I don't want to go to a Baroque drum, which would be just a small kind of bowl kettle, and with little like crank lugs around it, and sitting on a wooden stand, because it's not a Baroque ensemble. But I want that kind of sound. I want to bridge the gap between modern sound.
What is that Baroque sound? Is it just light?
It's very light and like very pointy. And so I got these drums they're on the kind of stage left side, and they were actually designed by a guy named Hans Schneller, who was the tympanist in Vienna through the turn of the century. I think up through like 1934 or something like that. And he had come up with this different kind of bowl design, and at that time those were the modern drums that were like big, but compared to what the drums that I have up there, they're smaller. And there's no pedal on them. It's just a crank. It's just a hand crank. In fact, they're called Kurbelpauken, which is German for crank drum. And I use calfskin heads on them. And on my main drums, I use plastic. And And so they sound authentic. I play wooden mallets on them. So they sound
Not wrapped in felt at all?
No, it's just wood. And I don't have it would look something like this, but without the little piece of leather on there. And so I get this kind of pointy, organic sound, but it's big enough so that I can hang with the Oregon Symphony when they're playing Mozart, rather than just a small group. Because if you're playing with a real Baroque group, I subbed in with a Baroque ensemble in Cleveland when I was there. Apollo's Fire, great Baroque group, and I played on real Baroque instruments, and it's different. It's a smaller sound. They're all using Baroque instruments, and so those kind of drums work. So these are kind of bridging the gap between like real early period drums and modern drums.
So the modern drums, you mentioned the pedal.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you change the pitch.
Yes.
Because you've got, 4 drums up there,
Mm-hmm.
but it has the capacity, an infinite number of combinations of notes.
There's generally about a seventh to an octave per drum. And you can change the pitch with a pedal, and then there's also a crank as well. So the crank is called the fine tuner. So a lot of times you'll get the pitch where you want with the pedal, and then if it's you want to make it a little sharper, a little flatter, you can then just use your hand to crank to get like a really fine tune.
So when we, during the concert, see you kind of lean over and put your ear, it's not like you're taking a nap. You're actually just testing the, testing the tone of the pitch.
I will reveal sometimes, and generally in rehearsal, if I'm really tired, if I have to yawn, I always lean over like I'm going to tune. So nobody ever knows. That's one of those tricks I learned. It's great, too. Nobody ever notices. So now you'll wonder if I'm yawning or actually tuning the drums.
Well, you mentioned earlier about how, like any percussionist, a big part of your job is not actually playing, but it's counting rests.
Yeah.
So when you practice at home, is it dumb to ask, do you practice counting rests? I mean, that's an important part. You don't want to come in as a timpani player where you make a big entrance. You don't want to come in wrong.
Everything I play is kind of solo because I'm the only tympanist on stage. And everyone always kind of assumes, like, well, yeah, but you're still part of the percussion section. But I don't sit next to any of the percussionists. And I really don't sit next to, I sit kind of next to the brass, but if I get lost, I can't look over and be like, dude, where are we? And so the thing is like every other section has somebody next to them where they can be like, yeah, okay, good, got it. And I don't. And if I screw up, it can be like catastrophic. So I actually practice counting rests. I would say I spend probably 75% of my practice time away from my drums with a score and headphones or speakers and a pencil and eraser. And I write in cues and I conduct. And sometimes I'm wondering, like, well, is Carlos going to take this in 2 or in 4? So I'll conduct it in 2 and in 4. So I know exactly what to expect. Because a lot of times people are counting on me to know what's going on. And if I don't know what's going on, I can't look over and ask somebody else. So I have to over-prepare and write in a bunch of cues so that I never get lost. And I'll probably get lost tonight because I said that. But I do that so that I have multiple safety nets, so that I'm counting like crazy. I've got my rests, so I got my cues. Every time I see a cue, it's like if I'm counting 50 measures of rest, like, okay, 19, the flute comes in. And then this, and I'm doing that, and then, I'm watching the conductor for a cue. And hopefully on top of that, if I get lost through all those safety nets, I've listened to the piece enough to just intuitively know, like, I should be able to come in here. Actually, John Tafoya, who's the principal tympanist in National Symphony in D.C., he always said that you should know the piece so well by ear that you shouldn't even need any music. That it should just be so internalized. You're just really breathing and feeling the music, and that you know what's going on. And so I don't always, with the amount of repertoire I play, that's really hard to do, but I always try to make sure I really know in my ear what the tunes sound like on top of all those other safety nets. So
I can't tell you how enjoyable it's been to learn a little bit about the timpani. Sitting back there all by yourself in the back. This is John Greeney. He's been with the Oregon Symphony as our principal tympanist for 18 months. I'm looking forward to hearing what you're doing tonight.
All right. Well,
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you
Enjoy
all.
the concert tonight.